Welcome back, everybody. Don't stop us now is our theme for this session. So I'm Dorcas Beaton, and I'm on your management team on behalf of Methodology, and I'm one of the 3 co-chairs of our technical advisory group, where I'm also joined by Bing Bingham and George Wells. So welcome to our session where we're doing a discussion of mastering methodology in OMRACT. And at this session each year, we choose one part of the methods that we use in our core outcome set development, and we look at it with a great deal of focus. And, which we're doing this year, we look for your input to help us improve that step. So this OMRACT, we want to focus on reinforcing our domain definitions with more detailed descriptions of those target domains. So we're going to be building on the work that you've already been helping us with, where we chose domains for some domains that we're actually finding in common across a number of different core sets. And we'll be adding a richer description to those domains. Now, to help us think about this a little bit more, I've asked for a guest to come in. So, Kaz, can you come in? Come on up. So, we know yesterday that we met Kaz, and we know that Kaz has some domains within Kaz, and this whole exercise isn't about changing what's inside of Kaz or changing even the definition that Kaz knows, but it's about trying to understand Kaz a bit more. What is it? So if Kaz says, I like sports, well, which sport and what level of competition? So what we're about today is taking these common definitions and figuring out the Tinder profile before we let that definition go on a date with one of our instruments. So we're setting up our definitions in a little bit more detail. So thank you very much, Kaz, for coming back. That's great, thank you. Domain definitions that you've been working on are the bridge between our domain work and when we move into instrument selection. So when you do your definitions for the onion that you're handing in, you will see that very same definition appear at step 1 of our instrument selection process. Because that's where we recommend that you spend a lot of time going back and thinking through what it is you're trying to measure in this target domain. And then as you move through instrument selection, you'll see it reappearing at the stage where we're looking at whether or not an instrument is a good match. And that's where we ask, the definition almost becomes like a gold standard, because that becomes what we're actually trying to capture with a good instrument. So to be able to have this gold standard, just as we're saying with our little Kaz there, we need to have enough description of the domain so that we can tell if it's a good match and if you want to actually go on a date with this domain. So if we look at just one quick example, because I just want to say the JIA example this morning was brilliant, like just where they had their definition and they had more description of it, and that's what we're after. But if we took something like pain and intensity, how would we reinforce that? Well, if you want to reinforce it, I might go to stakeholders or responders to pain questions and say, you know, what's the range of pain that's likely going to be experienced? And when we do that type of questioning, we might hear, well, that concept of pain, it has to include pain that gets so intense that you can't even feel yourself thinking. You can't think. Or it also needs to include pain that is completely eradicated and gone. Or sometimes we hear, it has to get to the pain where I can forget about the pain and get on with my daily life. So when you think about that, then when you do move over to instrument selection, here's just 2 possibilities. The binary one, the first one, might have done a good job for that very severe, intense pain, but it's not going to be able to pick up the milder pain. And maybe something like a numeric rating scale of pain, where it is graded and can get down to those milder levels, might be the preferred one to continue with. Now, we know that bridging this gap is often a struggle for groups, but as we in the methods groups and our methodologists go into support working groups, and the TAG talks about the struggles all the time, and what we're finding is that groups are often struggling with the very same domains. So we think that if we're noticing those struggles across domains, and if the descriptions and the definitions do fit across different working groups' needs, wouldn't that be a wonderful resource to have, to develop some common definitions and common descriptions? And imagine being a new working group and coming in and being able to have a look at that as a starting point, as a foundation for some of our work. So that's what we're about today. And the order of operations this morning is that we're going to have a talk from Bing Bingham about just the use of shared definitions and how they could benefit us. Ben Horgan is going to be representing our patient's perspective and bringing a view of the idea of definitions and their meaning and meaningfulness to, from the patient's perspective. Caitlin Jones, who's our fellow, and Lara Maxwell, who's our methodologist, are going to talk about the results of the survey that many of you participated in to select the definitions, those core definitions. And then Lara's going to introduce us to the breakout sessions where we're going to be elaborating on those definitions, doing the Tinder profile. And then you'll go off into your breakouts, and we'll talk about Lara. We'll walk you through that a bit. And then George Wells will lead us through the wrap-up, the report back and wrap-up at the end, back in this room. So I'm going to call first on Bing to just lead us into the use of shared definitions.
Thank you, and welcome everybody back. I'm going to go through just a few slides in a couple of minutes and talk to you about this concept of universal domains, or what have been called widely relevant domains or universally relevant domains. A lot of the things that we look at in terms of our domain sets and in terms of our core sets, we see common things coming up over and over and over again. And this has been introduced as the concept of widely relevant domains and outcomes. So this is from PROMIS. So PROMIS is a large patient-reported outcome measurement information system that was developed by the NIH and is translated into a lot of different languages. But this measurement system was created based on this fundamental concept that symptoms like pain and fatigue can be relevant across multiple different chronic conditions. Okay? And therefore, if you had a definition that could embrace all this concept that would apply across all of these conditions, you would really have a very ideal measurement system that could be used so that you wouldn't have to create a separate instrument for fatigue in multiple sclerosis and a separate instrument for fatigue in lupus and a separate instrument for fatigue in rheumatoid arthritis, because fatigue is a general concept that applies across different chronic conditions. So this terminology of universally relevant or universal or widely relevant domains has come up from the PROMIS network. And these are the definitions the sort of the information from PROMIS. It acknowledges that there are outcomes and symptoms that individuals with different conditions find relevant. Examples include pain, fatigue, physical function, depression, and social function. And if you look at the PROMIS framework, it outlines a number of these universal domains that have been identified, and with PROMIS, there are actually instruments attached to them. But we're going to talk today about the concept of domains and the definitions of domains and trying to make those common across our different working groups. So here are some of the examples: pain, fatigue, sleep, physical function, depression, anxiety, social participation, self-efficacy. So imagine, if you will, that we have a common definition that each group would be able to use and tap into to describe that concept of interest. We heard from the FDA yesterday about this term, the concept of interest, okay? And that is the FDA's terminology for what we talk about in terms of domains. And they want to you want to be sure that you have a good concept that has been defined. So concept of interest, domain, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about what does that mean. So why might this be helpful for us as OMERACT as an organization? Well, number one, if we have a common definition that everyone can agree upon for the different diseases, this will speed up this process of core set development. It'll speed it up because each group is not trying to invent their own definition of a concept. And these are broadly applicable concepts across diseases. It'll improve our ability to compare things across studies. If we are using the same domain definition, it may also accelerate our ability to identify instruments that reflect that concept that could also be used across different core sets. So then we would have the opportunity to potentially compare levels of fatigue in one condition versus another condition, for instance. It would enhance the ability for us to synthesize and generalize our findings by, again, talking the same language. This is really about trying to get from a Tower of Babel with everyone communicating different things about what we mean about things to one common definition. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. When we look at the OMERACT core domain sets that have been developed, I'm sorry that I tried to enlarge this, but I had trouble with it this morning. If you look at, for instance, pain, we see that 13 different core sets have pain in their core set. If we look at fatigue, that's present in 6. This concept of health-related quality of life in 9, physical function in 13. So these are opportunities for us to think about these different terms and how we might come up with a common definition for those. So what you're going to hear about for the rest of the speakers that are up here, I'm going to walk through what has been done so far with OMERACT, with various surveys and other things that have been done that are going to be introduced to us, and what the membership of OMERACT has thought about domains, definitions that were identified from other groups, and the votes that took place on those. And then we're going to go into the groups to talk about how this might fit or how it might not fit within a particular context of use. Okay? So I'm going to turn it over to, I think, to Ben next, who's going to give us a little bit about the patient's perspective of this concept. Thank you.
Just say to me once, I want you to write everything down before you say it. And let's just say that I'm not a radio announcer anymore. So as patient research partners, we're used to working with broad domains such as pain and fatigue, but within each working group, these domains may be defined somewhat differently. That difference may be due to the focus of the core outcome set, the number of PRPs who provide input into the working group, the PRP's level of participation within that group, or their varied lived experiences that they're drawing from. A foundational definition establishes a shared language and framework, facilitating collaboration amongst the PRPs, researchers and the other stakeholders. This provides a common starting point, fosters synergy and ensures that all stakeholders are working towards a common goal. Not only do foundational domain definitions standardise these target domain definitions, but they give the PRPs the assurance that many other PRPs working within the OMERACT community informed this definition. Patient research partners played a key role in the domain definition development, as Caitlin is about to talk to you about, outlined in the numbers who participated in the survey. Now that we have consensus on these 5 foundational domains and their definitions in this exercise today, we're interested in our PRP's lived experience to further understand the robust nature of the agreed definition for the next step of the instrument selection. So let's make sure as a group that our patient partners are really driving the conversation in the piece of work that we're about to undertake. Thank you.
So we've heard from Bing and Ben about the important reasons behind creating a set of foundational domains with their definitions. So now Lara and I will present the work that's been done to decide upon these recommended detailed definitions. First, we did a targeted search for existing definitions for these domains. We looked at all the OMERACT manuscripts that described the endorsement of their core domain sets. We also looked at key organisations and their initiatives that have published definitions for these domains. And these included things like Impact, Promise, ISAQOL, WHO, and Integrate. We then created a survey with the different definition options for each domain, and we pilot tested these with the OMERACT Technical Advisory Group. The survey was sent to the OMERACT community, then asking them to rank the definitions in order of relevance. And we also asked for other suggestions for domain definitions as well as general comments. So we received 115 responses from this first round, and based on these responses, we sent a second survey to the community. We provided a brief description of the results from the first round. So for 3 of the domains, pain intensity, pain interference, and health-related quality of life, there was a clearly preferred definition. And so we asked in this second round whether everyone agreed with it, could live with it, or disagreed with it. For the other 3 domains, which were fatigue, physical function, and patient global, the results from the first round were not so straightforward, and 2 definitions received similar rankings. So for these ones, we asked the survey participants which of the 2 options they preferred. We had 104 responses, including 66 PRPs and 38 other stakeholders, and we analysed the data in round 2 by these 2 groups. We took the results of the second round to the OMRAC Technical Advisory Group to ask if they had any major concerns that were significant enough to override the recommendations from these surveys. And we moved forward with recommended definitions for 5 domains that we're going to discuss further with you today. However, for the domain of patient global, the votes after the second round were split almost evenly between 3 different definitions. So we decided that this domain needs further work in order to recommend a definition, and we'll bring interested people together into a working group to do some more work on this in the future. So now Lara will take us through the key results for each of the domains.
Thanks, Caitlin, for describing the survey methodology to everybody. So I'm going to now take you through the results for each of those 5 domains. And as I do so, I'm also going to introduce you to the 2 TAG champions or leads for each of the domains. You're going to stay in the breakout rooms, and they are going to come through and rotate through the 5 breakout rooms and work through the task with you. So it's going to be a little like speed dating. It's going to be a wee bit chaotic. They'll have 15 minutes with you each before they move on. But we're going to start with pain intensity here. So here's the definition: the daily average of the intensity of the sensation of pain expressed on a range from no pain to worst pain imaginable. And that source of that is from the OMRAC manuscript, Lessons Learned from Imaging, which was published by Mata and team recently. And here we have George Wells and Peter Tugwell. They're going to be leading this domain. The results from the first round, you saw strong support for one of those 4 definition options that we had. And as you can see on the chart on this slide, in the second round, there was strong approval for this definition, with 96% of the patient research partners and 100% of the other stakeholders saying they either agreed or could live with this definition. Moving on to pain interference, and here's the definition: consequences of pain on relevant aspects of one's life. This includes the extent to which pain hinders engagement with social, cognitive, emotional, physical, and recreational activities. The source of this definition is PROMIS. And here we have Ernest Choi and Zahi Tuma leading this domain. After the first round, there was a clear preference for one definition over the other 2. And the chart shows that in the second round of the survey, I think almost 99% of the PRPs and 100% of the other stakeholders, again, either agreed or could live with the recommended definition. So we have another strong endorsement for this definition. Next is health-related quality of life, and the definition: a term referring to the health aspects of quality of life generally considered to reflect the impact of disease and treatment on disability and daily functioning. It has also been considered to reflect the impact of perceived health on an individual's ability to live a fulfilling life. And the source of this definition is ISOQOL. And our leaders for this are Sabrina Mai-Nielsen, Annalise Boonin, and Andrea Doria. And out of the candidate definitions put forward in the first survey, one was definitively favored after that first round. And in fact, no other definition achieved as much support in the first round as this definition. And as you can see, it has a resounding 100% agreement by both PRPs and other stakeholders. So this is a very strong yes for this definition. Moving on to fatigue, the recommended definition is sourced from PROMIS. Range of symptoms from mild subjective feelings of tiredness to an overwhelming, debilitating, and sustained sense of exhaustion that likely decreases one's ability to execute daily activities and function normally in family or social roles. You'll note that we added an asterisk after discussions with TAG, as we felt it was important to clearly define what we meant by the term normal. So here it relates to what is typical or usual for you as an individual. And we have Bing Bingham and Alexa Mira leading this domain. So as Caitlin mentioned, 2 definitions went into round 2, and as you can see, over 90% of both PRPs and other stakeholders either agreed or could live with this definition. And now we come to our final domain, physical function. The definition is physical functioning is defined as one's ability to carry out various activities that require physical capability, ranging from self-care, activities of daily living, to more vigorous activities that require increasing degrees of mobility, strength, or endurance. And here we have Robin Christensen and Karine Tupan-April are leading this domain. Again, we had 2 definitions out of 4 that were almost identically ranked for preferences after the first round. So those 2 went into round 2, and you can see that 97% of PRPs and 90% of other stakeholders agreed or could live with this definition. So this was a very high-level overview of the results from the 2 rounds of the survey, but they included over 100 people, and we had really strong feedback from our PRPs, which we really appreciate. And so the response from the OMRAC community to guide our innovative work to promote these foundational domain definitions as a resource to working groups and help them move forward, I think you can see that the numbers speak to the level of endorsement that has come through on these instruments. So thanks to all who responded to the surveys. We really appreciate your feedback and helping us move forward. And now we're going to move on to George to explain the breakout tasks. Thank you.
So you've heard from Dorcas, Bing, Ben, Caitlin, and Laura. And now what we want to do is to hear from you. And of course, we're going to use the OMRAC way of doing that. The OMRAC way of doing that means that we're going to be putting you into breakout rooms. And you're going to be staying in the same breakout room. And you can find out which room it is by, of course, going to the app. Now, the task for doing this in this session is to elaborate on the descriptions of these domains, the ones that Laura just went through for you, to support the move to instrument selection, which is going to be our next step. And you'll notice a little box just below that big blue box on task, which is basically, is it a match with the target domain? Is it truth? When you're in these sessions, the way that we visualize it, you'll have maybe a minute to kind of review the definition and so on and so forth. Then maybe you can talk to a partner about it for a couple of minutes, and then there'll be a full discussion of the whole process. How can we help you with that discussions? Again, as Laura's gone through the pairs of content experts and the reporter, they will be joining your room for the specific question that you're dealing with at that time, the ones that they've been assigned for. But most importantly, and probably the most important one, is this next group of individuals who are going to be your facilitators. 5 very experienced OMRACers are going to help you go through this task to be able to provide us with the feedback that we need and we want and we look forward to. And then when the feedback comes back, it'll be from the reporters. They're going to report back. They're given 1 minute. We're going to put them up on the stage. They'll have 1 minute to talk about their question and the points that they found out as they went from one group to the next to the other. And then after that, we'll have a general discussion. All right, so if there's no questions, I don't think there will be. Let's see if we're on time. Actually, we're 6 minutes behind. That's not bad. We're gonna say you got 10 minutes to get to your room, but we're gonna now say that you've got to 10 o'clock to get to your room. So good luck. We're looking forward to your feedback and see you back here at approximately 11:30. So thank you very much for for sticking through 5 domain questions. And I noticed that some of them were really intense and painful. Others were fatigue. And I'm sure our quality of life has improved. Oh, very good. So we're going to have a bit of a feedback. We've got our 5 rapporteurs up here. They've written down in a 1-minute quote-unquote speech something that related to their particular question. And so we're just going to go through it. So if I could have the pain intensity question up on the screen, that would be very helpful. And we'll start with pain intensity. And Peter Tugwell is going to give us the key points that he found as he went through the 5 sessions. Peter.
Great, thanks very much. Fantastic discussions. Some things were consistent discussions, but learned a lot of new issues that have come up. And so we asked people to really concentrate on their lived experience. And clearly we need to elaborate a bit more on 5 of the words. So the first thing is pain. And people wanted to know whether it was just physical pain or it included emotional pain, because you're asking about the overall experience. For example, someone had died in the family, you're also interested in that at the same time as their arthritis. So that needs a bit of elaboration. Secondly, which came out in every group, you obviously hate daily average. And a whole lot of issues that came up around that, so we need to elaborate on that. And I'm told the FDA is asking for weekly, for example. So we needed some elaboration on that. And a lot of people are saying daily average pain includes all sorts of stuff. Are you talking about intensity alone? Or are you talking about it being intermittent or constant? Are you talking about the frequency? Are you talking about the duration? This kept coming up. So some elaboration of what's intended there. The third issue was the issue of context. This kept coming up. For example, it was commented that if someone's very tired, the way in which they assess pain is going to be very different from if they're energetic. And likewise, the time of day. A lot of individuals were saying first thing in the morning is much worse than later on. So how do you decide on the average? Third issue is what do you mean by sensation? And some people commented they get paresthesia at the same time. Are you including that at the same time? And the last issue is the word worth, worse or worse. I'm not sure the English of worse or worst, but anyway. And people saying that, again, varies. You have to communicate with the individual patient. And one patient commented that frequently it is unimaginable. That it's what is the end of the scale that says imaginable? That was it. Thank you.
Okay. Now I was Peter's partner going through the different sessions. That was a very nice summary. Our next summary, we can bring the pain interference slide up, the definition, and we'll get our 1-minute summary there. My suggestion for worse or worst was worstest, but he didn't buy it.
Okay. So we had a very interesting discussion around the definition for pain interference. A lot of groups raised the use of the word relevant in the sentence, which could be maybe not the best choice. We talked about as well the link here between causality and association and the ambiguity that could be associated with the word level. We did talk as well about the necessity of including missing words in the definition, particularly work, sleep, and education. We had a discussion as well around the difference between acute versus chronic or short-living pain and how can this be measured and captured in this concept. Now, regarding the implication, we have really very important things here, particularly implication on work, family, such as family often trying to be protective and trying to help us to avoid pain, participation in life leisures, spending time with friends, family, impact on fear from doing things without experiencing pain, avoidance of participation in life, a emotional feeling, frustration, part of pain, impact on mood disturbance, social and role participation as well. Other group also highlighted the impact on giving more irritability, relation with others, implication on ADL, such as even getting your coffee or doing simple other tasks in life, implication on physical activity, social activity, career path, progression in life, as well as progression of cognitive abilities in life and sleep. And let me see. Those are the main things.
Thank you very much. Our next one is going to be health-related quality of life.
Yes,
And that's an easy concept to talk about.
there are many really good points raised in the breakout groups, and some of the common ones that was across the groups were, sorry? Closer. Is that better? Okay, so I said there was many good points raised, and some of the common ones are these, that quality is difficult to quantify, and that health-related quality of life may not necessarily only be about the level of daily functioning, but it may depend on the individual patient's priorities, expectations, and memory of their life before the disease and how they have adapted to their new situation. So it can be very subjective, which items are relevant for the concept and for one's ability to live a fulfilling life. Yeah, that was all.
Very good. The next definition to put up is fatigue, which is the way I felt when I got to the fourth room.
I think we all have a definition of fatigue today or after this meeting. So there's a bunch of themes that came out through the fatigue meeting, and thank you all for participating. The definition does include both severity, the amount, and the impact, which is both important to patients. The definition does reflect a continuum from mild to severe, but are we missing intermittent? Types of fatigue are not reflected in this definition, whether it's emotional versus mental, physical, endurance, and how much does that matter? To what extent does that matter? Is attribution of fatigue possible? And it's highly individual and highly contextual, because then there are things like pain fatigue, mental fatigue, just life fatigue, inflammatory disease, whatever comorbidity, and is that really possible? How do we anchor this definition? Though that is more of an instrument question, but how do we anchor it to a time frame and compared to what? So is it compared to before the disease, yesterday, compared to what? Should normal be usual? And I'll air quotes all of those. And that the word social actually, by the PROMIS definition, does include work, family, and leisure, and there was some confusion about that. That's us.
Does it work? Does it
And
work?
last but not least, we'll pull up the definition of physical function. Corinne.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, I just want to say that probably I won't do justice to all the great comments that you give. It was a very quick speed dating. So I'll do my best. So there were many good comments that were mostly about measurements. So I'm kind of not really going through all of these because the way to measure physical functioning, I think we had a lot of comments on this and it will need further discussion. So overall, I think people gave good comments and thought that the definition was pretty good. They also recommended to add, a bit, to give more clarification and elaborate on a few points. So one of them, for example, adding the notion of fluctuations in physical functioning over the course of a day and from day to day. So that was something mentioned by many groups. Adding the consideration of the use of adaptations and adaptive equipment. So can they do something, but is it with adaptations or not? Adding the impact of physical functioning on emotional well-being as well. That was found to be important. Adding examples related to various rheumatic conditions. So, for example, eyesight, swallowing, ability to speak. So there's a lot of these activities that may be different, may vary between diseases. And then there's some terms, I think, that people ask many questions about. So some of the terms like ability versus capability. So I think it would be good to clarify. Self-care may mean different things to different people. And so that was raised as a question as well. So maybe there's a need to clarify what we mean. And then there's also the term rigorous, which we had big discussions about. What does it mean, rigorous? And people mentioned that they really like the term varying. It's varying. It's not necessarily going from nothing to very rigorous. So that's it. One of the other comments we had is that we definitely had more clinicians and researchers than patient partners in all of our group. And so we really felt that it would be good to debrief with patient partners, if that's okay, because I find it would be good to have their voice really kind of equally represented. So that's one thing we felt. So thank you.
So a wise person at OMRAC once told me that if people engage in a hearty debate and you hear conversations over coffee and you see people in rooms getting really excited, and that's good because you're engaging in the topic. So thank you all very much for engaging in our discussions today. So what is this going to mean for us? So we are still going to continue to work on trying to get a foundation of these more universally shared domains and their definitions. So we'll move the elaborations. We have all the sheets, and we'll take them back and move them into some domain templates and share those with you on the website and just for discussion. We wanted to point out that because you probably have more things to tell us, which is great, we really do want that there's two options. The app is now going to have an open text field under our section where you can add more comments into a discussion, and please do that, and we will take those, we'll download those and take those into hearty consideration. Tomorrow during the lunch break at 2 p.m. we'll be meeting back in this room, and we'll just be here to answer any questions that you have. So it's optional, but we're just going to be here to have a discussion if there's any ongoing points there. So I think with this, we're actually in pretty good shape, because the next thing we'd like to consider is whether we can talk, when we have these definitions, about instruments that might follow these definitions and be resources again for groups who might have a need for doing an instrument. So we'll be taking some instruments and moving them through the SOMP for a wide range of rheumatic disorders and seeing if that works for us. And before I close, I do have some people that I want to really shout out and say thanks to. Our facilitators, our content experts, and our reporters. You've seen now TAG in action. Their members are content experts and reporters were members of your technical advisory group. So thank you for digging in. There's a lot of work to prepare for, so a little thanks for them, please. Special shout out to my co-chairs, Bing Bingham and George Wells, who helped very much in preparing this, but it could not have been done without our methodologist, Laura Maxwell, who's out the back. And she's sitting beside Shauna, who made the magic happen in assigning everybody to groups and figuring out how the rotations would work. And to Caitlin, our fellow, who put a tremendous amount of effort into this. And of course, to our patient partners, Ben and Kathy, who really kept us on track and to the point and what we really needed to get out of this session. So thank you all very much for participating today. Don't stop us now. We got this going.